Hello everyone, thanks for listening. My name is Bill Quinn and this is my podcast. If this is your first time listening, this podcast is all about nonprofits in New York City. Well, mostly about nonprofits in New York City. We occasionally talk to people in different countries, and I always love doing that. If this is your first time listening, welcome. This episode is a special episode. It's a little different than the normal episode where I interview one person from one organization. In this episode, I took all of the pieces of advice I've had in every episode so far, and I've put it together and packaged together in this episode. So everything you're going to hear is different people, different nonprofit leaders giving advice about running an organization, starting an organization. Some of it ranges from the very, very practical, and some of it is really just kind of inspirational. So, and of course, everything in between. I want to thank all the people that were in this episode, and I will mention them as they come up. I've had a chance to interview some really wonderful people in the first year plus that have been able to do this. And so I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to do that. And when I collected all these pieces of advice, I realized that I wanted to fit them into sort of thematic groups. And while it's sort of imperfect, and as you listen, you may hear stronger connections than the ones I made between pieces of advice, this is what I did. The first piece of advice that we're going to come across is called, "You're just one person." One of the themes that came out of this is no matter how much of a multi-talented superstar you are, you can't possibly know everything about running an organization successfully. So that's why we're calling it this, "You're just one person." You're going to hear from Thor Snilsberg, City Science, Karina Nagin of Mission Restore, Heather Freudenthal from the Sunday Film Series, and Angela Torregoza from the Sex Worker Project, in that order. So as you listen to this, if there's anyone that really jumps out at you, or if they all do, definitely go back and listen to the complete interviews with these people. They were all great to listen to. I think they're terrific interviews. So here it is. You're just one person. What have you learned that you could pass on to new startups?
That is a really, really good question. And the Community Resource Exchange just came out with a book on common problems and solutions for NGO or nonprofit executive directors. And I was emailing with the author of the book jokingly, is this a multi-volume book? Because there's a lot of challenges that you face as a nonprofit. But I think the one thing that I would pass along and that I would probably do differently looking back is I would seek to partner with someone with more complementary skills. I think that running a nonprofit requires so many different skill sets that it probably would have been advantageous to City Science to have a co-founder or to have a wing person, the proverbial, right-hand man, left hand, whatever it is. I think you really can't do it by yourself. So because I was the only founder, I've surrounded myself by mentors. So I think that's a really good way to bridge the gap. You can't know it all, so you have to have people to go to for advice. A really good example of that is in the area of bookkeeping. A really good example of that is in the area of development. A really good example is in the area of board training and development. These are topics that take a lot of time to become a master of. So finding a good mentor or having a good co-founder is really critical.
What have you learned? What is one piece of advice that you could pass on to someone who's in a similar situation or hoping to be in a similar situation?
I think whatever work that you're doing, it's first and foremost you have to understand the local context and be working in partnership with the communities that you're looking to serve. So I think too often sort of the first misstep that a lot of well-intentioned organizations make are thinking that they have the solution and that they can go into a community and bring them the solution. And that's not the case. Local communities, the surgeons we work with, they have the best knowledge and understanding of what the needs are. So it's really important, I think, early on in whatever work you're doing to have a strong relationship and partnerships with the organizations and the communities that you want to work with. So I think first and foremost, it's about communicating and having equal partnership with them.
So do you do that? I mean, is that something that you have? Do you have a trip, kind of a pre-trip, or where you go to a place and kind of do some of your research and bring it back, or do you talk to the people on the phone a lot? Like how do you do that specifically?
Absolutely. So in-person visits, and then oftentimes we're invited because one hospital has heard of us, and a surgeon talks to another surgeon and they invite us to come to their hospital. But we always do an initial needs assessment to see if it is the right environment for us to work in. And so that means both, do they have the infrastructure that's needed? And then also, is there buy-in from the leadership of the hospital? So do they want us there?
Right.
Which, it seems silly, but it's sort of a critical question that a lot of people skip. Is this something that is needed and wanted by the administration? So once we do a needs assessment, if we see that our trainings and our programs can be helpful, and we see that the leadership of the hospital has buy-in and wants to be working with us and create that partnership, then we sign a 3-year partnership with the hospital so that they know that we're there for a minimum of 3 years. So it's not a one-off, it's not a short-term, one-time visit, and then we build on that. But it always starts with an initial conversation, an initial needs assessment, and then making sure that it's sort of mutually beneficial on both ends.
What have you learned, if you were to talk to someone who's maybe trying to start the same thing, trying to start a film series, what have you learned that you'd be interested in passing on to someone doing something similar? What's some of the big lessons?
Well, I think number one is you have to recognize your strengths and weaknesses. This is easily the kind of job that one person can do by themselves. I see it a lot with myself and with other film programmers. That being said, like I said, there are screenings that I go to sometimes where I think, okay, the film is great, but the presentation of the host is not so great. Or, oh, this projector or sound system is not that great, or whatever. So it makes me think, okay, it reminds me that there are a lot of moving parts to a screening, So it's really like, recognize what you're really good at and let yourself take the charge on that, but give up a little bit of responsibility in areas where you're not so great. And, there are kids in film school, college kids, even graduate kids that would love to have internships and help out with things like that. So it's really not that expensive to get some help in the areas that you really need. So I would say just to do that, just to make sure that your overall presentation is really flawless. You also have to be a really good negotiator and manager, because you're dealing with filmmakers who have various schedules and various personalities and various, time restrictions and sometimes just legal restrictions. They say, I'd love to show this film, but I'm actually not allowed to air it out, outside, Canada or whatever it is. And so you really have to just be prepared to kind of wear many hats, I think. Really bringing other people on to make sure that the screening process, and when I say screening, I mean reviewing of the films before you choose them, that you're being fair. Because you still are just one person. And as much as you can trust your own judgment, and as much as people might say, I trust your taste completely, or you have great taste or whatever, you're still just one person. And you could be missing something. Or you could have kind of a blind spot. A friend could submit a film and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But you might just feel that way because it's your friend or something. And it's important to have a trusted partner almost to say, what do you think of this film? Do you think this would be a good, so...
I think it would be really two things. One would be to, just the importance of building a coalition and really engaging people that, for example, even people or organizations that you don't necessarily think would, would support your cause, but really I guess showing people the big picture as to why they should support your cause. For example, with the No Condoms is Evidence bill, we engaged health organizations because really this is a public health issue, and we engaged other advocates. And so I think that's very important when for example, when you're advocating for certain policies, is to really paint the big picture and get a lot of people involved in your cause. And the second, the second note would be to use the media, social media in particular, to really publicize the cause, to publicize the work that the nonprofit organization does.
All right, so this next section we're calling Keeping Your Eyes on the Road. Now, it's easy to get distracted by ideas, fun projects, and get pulled in different directions when you're trying to do things, and you have so many different options. So we'll hear from people who talk about meeting that particular challenge. My thanks go out to Hope for New York's Catherine Evans and Project Attica's Anthony Posada. With all your experiences, I mean, you operate or you support 40 organizations, and you obviously do a lot of great work. What is one lesson you've learned that you could pass on to people who might be interested in running a nonprofit or doing similar work to what you do?
I think working in a nonprofit is incredibly rewarding, but it's also very difficult. You know, you deal with a lot of resource constraints, and most nonprofits have a pretty lean staff doing a lot of different things. And so I think we've learned at Hope for New York that it's very important for our staff to constantly revisit our mission and why we do what we do, because it's very easy to get weighed down, and especially for our work, because we do so much coordination into some of the administrative tasks or the logistics, and that you can lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing and why we believe in what we're doing. And so I would say for staffs to consistently come together around stories of hope and transformation that your work has accomplished, and just reinforcing with one another the vision and the mission and the big picture. It helps you push through, especially in times where you're feeling constrained by resources or time. Just to always revisit the vision, revisit the mission, and encourage one another in that.
This is Project Attica's 5th year,
Yes.
And in that 5 years, what is something you've learned that you could pass on to someone else who is also doing something similar or starting a nonprofit, or what have you learned in 5 years of your organization that you can pass on to other people?
I would have to start by saying they have to sit down, find the space, and write out what it is that they want to do. Because I started off with a very big idea, and I wanted to tackle many, many issues all at once. And then I started to find out, while getting the incorporation status, that it's all about honing in on what it is that your purpose is going to be about, and knowing specifically what that is. Because once you can get that figured out, everything else starts to fall into place. The filling of the application becomes easier. The finding the right people becomes easier. The getting the support becomes easier, because you can communicate what it is that you're about. So definitely, it sort of falls in line with saying, follow your dreams, but it's actually much more specific, because yes, it's your dream, but write it so that it's relatable, so that it's communicable, so that people can understand what it is that your dream is. That would be the first one. And the second sort of tip or advice would be, don't be daunted by the application process to get incorporation status, either in New York or with the federal government as a not-for-profit 501c3. The government has made it easier, as of the last 2 years, I believe, to file for not-for-profit status in a form that is available online, so you don't have to gather massive amounts of documents as the past. It was required to fill out almost like a book. It's still really good to keep a lot of your documents in one place, but the filing for the status has become much easier, so don't be afraid about that. But definitely the first point helps the second one a whole lot, because you need to be able to share with people what your interest is in a way in which they can take it away quickly from a quick conversation.
So this last section's theme is almost contradictory to the first two, which suggests to arrange help, organize your thoughts, spend time on the mission statement. I called this section Just Do It. Try things, experiment, learn from your mistakes. We'll hear from Reshma Patel with the Impact Network, Aaron Densham from the Bloom Collective, and Babita Patel from the Keo Project.
I guess my one piece of advice would be to be persistent and resilient. The work is pretty tough, and any little task can take so much longer than you anticipate. So, for example, one of my trips last year, I was visiting the schools with our regional director, and there was these desks that looked broken, and I was sort of like, what are these desks doing here? And he was like, oh, we need to get them fixed, but you have to get the bolts to do that. And they were out of bolts in Catete, which is the nearest town. And so then we went to Chapata to get the bolts, and they were sold out there too. And it turns out that you had to go like one country over to Malawi to get these particular bolts to fix these desks. So even like the simplest task that you think should take, like a couple hours or a half a day's work can take a long time. And I think being patient really goes a long way, but also being able to handle those types of delays with a little bit of grace and humor is the one thing that can keep someone sane in the work. So that's my one piece of advice.
What is something, if someone else has wants to do something similar, what is something you have learned that you could pass on?
I've been pretty happy with my trajectory, I think. I think maybe I would have listened to people around me a little bit more. Learned from. I think I was pretty stubborn. We sort of strolled into school at 22, 23 and started a department, and it was an absolute blessing. I don't know why they ever trusted us to give a free run. We had to run around the school and do crazy things, but it was an absolute dream. And I often tell people that I spent 4 years like making mistakes there, which is wonderful. That's exactly how we learn. It's just running a session and being completely inappropriate, so then fixing it, and running it next time, and making mistakes and pissing people off. And but at the end of the day, that's how we learn: failure and fixing and learning, and failing and fixing and learning. And so I guess get out there and do that. Don't be afraid to step in and be silly and make mistakes and fix them. But I think if I give myself a little bit of advice, I can listen a little bit more to the more elderly educators around me.
I tell people who want to start their own venture to do it. Don't wait till it's all perfect and finalized and your idea is thought through from beginning to end, because frankly, you'll never start. Your idea will never get off the ground. The whole point of something new and exciting is to try it out and then to evaluate and reiterate and go back and do it again and, solve new problems. When I went off to Haiti for the first time, I just did it just to see what would happen. And every workshop that we've done after that has been a iteration of the first one, the previous one, with new tweaks, with changes to the plan that what would make it stronger and better and different, something that we forgot the first time, something that we would like to add. And then we try it again and, see if it succeeds or fails. And then the workshop after that will be a different one. So don't fear it, just to go out and do it. Otherwise, it will be an idea that stays inside your brain, kicking around till the end of time. So just go out and do it and be excited about what the possibilities are and don't have any expectations. Just try it out. Good luck.
And that's it. I hope you got something out of this collected wisdom from a collection of nonprofit leaders representing many decades of experience. Also, go back and listen to the episodes in their entirety. They're full of great stories, inspiring work, great people, and I've got plenty of plans for upcoming episodes. So be sure to subscribe on Twitter and all that stuff, and we'll see you soon. Well, if you like that episode, I have good news. There's plenty more on my website, thebillquinnpodcast.blogspot.com. Plus, you can get notices about future episodes by following me on Twitter and liking my Facebook page. The Twitter account is @bquinnpodcast. Also, you might work for an organization, run an organization, or know somebody who does work for an organization that would be a great fit for a future episode. Please get in touch. Email me at thebillquinnpodcast@gmail.com. I hope to hear from you.
Oh, words of wisdom.
Yes, yeah. This will paint the whole interview, whatever you say here, if it's good advice or not.
No pressure at all.